Green morning, green afternoon, green evening, wherever you are world over. We extend a very warm welcome to all our brothers and sisters across the globe, wherever you are. It's indeed a great pleasure that you are joining us today, and we are having 1066th webinar during this pandemic, right from 25th of March 2020, when there was a complete lockdown. We have come a long way, like doctors, nurses, paramedical people, they all were focusing basically on health sector, saving lives. At the same time, 1.65 1.65 billion children, they were away from schools, colleges, universities, institutions world over. And UNESCO, when they gave that particular alarming figure, we all decided from our chamber, why not we should dedicate the entire journey towards empowering education, holding teachers, holding youth, and doing the hand holding of parents as well. And that's the way we started the whole process and the whole journey. And we have come a long way, because there were a lot of challenges to people during this particular pandemic. People had lots of difficulties, and we can do understand, because we are in the most fragile scenario. What we are going to discuss, along with Professor Deepak Soodji, who basically laid down his arms and his civil uniform with the university, the Himachal Pradesh University. And he is the founder director for Institute of Vocational Studies. I still recall, and once I go through my little bit, the PPT which I have prepared, I would like to take you back to the journey way back in 1990, how it started and how the things were. Now, Wednesday, 21st of July, 2021, this evening at 1 minute past 5 p.m., we extend a very warm welcome to all of you, and a very special welcome to Professor Deepak Sood, because it's always a pleasure to meet old friends and well-wishers. Ladies and gentlemen, I still recall that initially it used to be Punjabi Parvasi Divas. That's from 1994 onward. And then we moved on. It was earlier IPCSI, International Punjabi Chamber for Service Industry. And then it became ICSI 2003 onwards, because Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, that also started happening. And then, of course, vibrant Gujarat, vibrant Telangana, vibrant Rajasthan, vibrant Karnataka, everything vibrant happening in the country. So I take you back to 1987, 1988. I still recall. And if I go back in my memory lane, Mr. Verma was the MD of the Himachal Pradesh Tourism Development Corporation, IS officer. He was also Home Secretary. And that time, Upma Chaudhary ji was the Director Tourism. And there was one Mr. Behel, if I recall, he was the manager in charge at the Hotel Holiday Home. We always used to call Triple H, HHH. And there was a HIMTAB, Himalayan Tourism Advisory Board meeting. And all the way we had Mr. S.K. Mishra. That time, tourism and civil aviation were together. We had all the North India, the chief ministers. And then we had IITTM, then the Ministry of Tourism. And there was a Himalayan Tourism Advisory Board meeting, which was basically set up in 1987. And 88, there was the first meeting, which was held in Shimla. And now I take you to a beautiful journey. I still recall it was 15th of August 1990, and there was complete holiday, and we all were celebrating Swatantrata Divas of India. And Honorable Vice Chancellor was very dynamic, very vibrant, and at the same time very humble. He invited me. He said that, why don't you come down to my Delhi? That time I was on deputation with the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, looking after with my colleagues the IITTM, Indian Institute of Travel and Tourism Management. And then we sat at the residence of the Honorable Vice Chancellor, and there was a small portable typewriter. And I still recall his residence was at a location. Right at the back was the small railway track. And I could find that toy train and that enjoyable train passing from there. And then I want to say it was something very nice. There was a call which was given to Professor Deepak Soodji. He was called for a cup of tea. We all had a discussion, and then two professors were chosen by the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Deepak Suji from the management. He took the charge, and along with him, we had Professor Desraj Gupta ji, together both of them. And then from there, the new journey started. I still recall. North India integrated tourism. I am coming further from there. 1990 onward, then we moved on. And I still recall Subhash Negiji was the Himachal Pradesh Tourism Development Corporation MD, and Mr. Kapoor was the Director Tourism. Major Vijay Singh Mankotia ji was the Honorable Honorable Tourism Minister, and that time it was decided that why not we should have an integrated tourism development of entire northern India, and Himachal Pradesh should be the theme. And on 27th September 1996, Himachal was the theme state. And can you see these cutouts? These are the replica of the various, designs, houses, and places, locations. And that is the entire Himachal Pradesh. It was erected right over here in Leisure Valley, Sector 10 in Chandigarh. And there was a North India integrated tourism promotion, Himachal Pradesh, with the theme state of Himachal. And that was on 27th September 1996. It was a wonderful, I would say, I still recall the memory so fresh. And we have come a long way. This was all human creation. That time, you can well imagine, there were small pagers which had just come, and people had started using the pager. We used to feel very happy. And thereafter, like a brick, a very big size mobile phone had come subsequently. And then look at it, where we are here today, 27 years later. And when I look back, ladies and gentlemen, something very interesting I wish to share: digital, social, and when we talk about digital marketing, social media marketing, green tourism, when we talk about, has the education curriculum, has the academics kept the pace actually with the changes, the rapid changes, the speed changes, the fast changes? Because the kind of a youth those are coming from the institutions today, have they really acquired the desired skills, practical know-how, and do they understand what exactly is the fragrance and the flavor of tourism? Because it's not a subject, it's an emotion, it's right from within. That's what Professor Deepak will talk to us. It's a pleasure that today he had been very kind. मैं तो यादों के पन्नों में, इतिहास के पन्नों में वापस लौट रहा हूं. And nowadays, I invited the other day Shri Ajit Butel ji, with whom we had a wonderful journey. We invited the first hotel owner of Chandigarh. We got, Sardar Manmohan Singh ji, he had also come. We invited a couple of other people with whom we had a long journey. Mr. Sudhir Sopti from Delhi Tourism, he was also a part of the journey. And then, of course, we are inviting Mr. S.K. Chopra, who is the pioneer and known as the father of Punjab tourism. We will be having him also. He's associated with tourism for last about 40 years. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, join me in extending a very warm welcome to Professor Deepak Sood. And when I look back, professor of the management in the prestigious Himachal Pradesh University since 1973, and till his retirement when he laid down the civilian arms in 2012, he dedicated his entire life for the education, empowerment, vocational skills. And all the time, I still recall, very practical person, very, very practical person. Always he used to tell me, Gulshanji, why don't we have something practical coming over here? And we used to talk so much with each other, deliberate and all that. And he is the founder director of the Institute of Vocational Studies, Himachal Pradesh University, way back in 1991. And he stayed there till 1997, where the Masters of Tourism Administration was started through the Ministry of Tourism, IITTM, Government of India. And in a very humble way, it's a proud privilege that India's first MBA Tourism was in Kurukshetra University. when Lieutenant General Balaramji was there, and Professor Divedi and one more professor saw with him. I was telling Professor Deepak Sood, I'm trying to locate Professor Divedi. If anybody can share his number with me, I would like to invite him also one of these days, because that time tourism was niche. It was altogether new. And how from a scratch, Professor Dr. Deepak Sood built up the entire empire, and later on the legacy had moved on and people had taken over. And he was the director of the Himachal Pradesh University Business School and member of the University Court, Executive Council and Finance Committee of Himachal Pradesh University. Since retirement, he's running a practical business now, his own business, and that's a beautiful restaurant with the name of Scandal Delights. And I was just laughing in my heart when we get face to face. I would tell him something which was coming to my mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, why why can't we have a practical education? Why can't we have a practical curriculum? And by the time curriculum tries to get changed through various hurdles, difficulties, and problems, by the time the industry moves on. And that's why when children they go to travel agencies, tour operators, travel agents, and tourist transporters, hoteliers, excursionists, they tell, अरे यार ये बच्चे बड़े theoretical है, इन बच्चों को कुछ प्रैक्टिकल सिखाओ, इन बच्चों को कुछ प्रैक्टिकल बताओ, इनको दोबारा से हमको 6 महीने लगाने पड़ेंगे, उसके बाद ये बच्चे सीख पाएंगे कि क्या है कैसे है. चलिए, इसके बाद रात को 8 बजे हम आपसे दोबारा भी मिलेंगे. There is a art integration in education. From the STEM we have moved to STEAM. आज हम शंकर जैक्सन जी को याद करेंगे, आज हम मदन मोहन जी को याद करेंगे, नौशाद जी को याद करेंगे, और बहुत सारे लोगों को, पंडित रविशंकर जी को भी याद करेंगे, और पंडित हविंदर कुमार जी, who is about 74 years young, he is going to be with us this evening. Eminent, sitarist, he is going to be with us with Sunaini, and that's going to be, and she is the granddaughter of the Nightingale of Punjab, Bibi Surinder Kaur ji. When you think about Punjabi music, you always think about Surinder Kaur, Prakash Kaur, and now Dolly Guleria, Sunani's mother, all these people. Our chamber is bringing almost 28 webinars per week. And as far as tourism, I think it gets into the blood of Deepak Suji as well as to mine, because domestic tourism, wellness tourism, herbal tourism, cinematic tourism, spiritual tourism, ecotourism, rural tourism, agri-tourism, village tourism, youth tourism, sports tourism, Buddhist tourism, heritage tourism, border tourism. And now Rajan Saigalji was talking yesterday from the PhD House Chamber of Commerce. Why don't we have also included holiday and leisure that's called golf tourism? I said, yes, that also is a beautiful activity. We will have it. And then we are having MSME, water management, waste to resource management, basic finance and insurance management, women and child empowerment, Ayurveda for the global wellness. We are focusing on northeast part of India, Vidya se Adhyatam Vidya ki aur, cinematic tourism, and every Sunday 8 p.m. we have with the non-resident Indians. So ladies and gentlemen, join me in extending a very warm welcome this evening, Professor Deepak Suji. It's indeed a great, great pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm feeling so privileged and so happy. Thank you. Thank you very much, Deepak ji. And itna acha lag raha hai, because after a long time we both are meeting. We have been talking on phone only. But now रूबरू आज आपसे जब मिल रहे हैं, आजकल डिजिटल भी रूबरू ही है. So let me take you back to 1990. वहां से स्टार्ट करते हैं. Professor Malhotra ji, inviting you, calling you, holding a discussion with you. Take me to your memory lane, and from there I'll come to your Scandal Point restaurant. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Gulshan ji, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to have talked to you after so many years, of course, and seeing you now. You're talking of memory lane. You already hit the button when you talked of 15th August and typing the letter on that portable typewriter. After that, as you know, but most of the others don't, we attended the 1 month course for trainers, training the trainers,
बताइए कहाँ गए थे आप, कहाँ गए थे आप?
organized by WTO and IITTM at the Indian Institute of Public Administration, Delhi. If I'm correct, that
Absolutely.
is where we
ITO,
attended the
ITO.
1 month course.
Yes.
It was a rigorous course. And after that, when we came back to our respective universities, Dr. K.C. Malhotra was a bit skeptical about the course starting because tourism administration was in its infancy. But we had a very dynamic tourism and civil aviation minister in Madhav Rao Sindhya ji, who, if I remember correctly, talked to us and said he wanted to start an Indian tourism service at par with the Indian administrative service so that India would be able to sell its rich heritage and tourist spots to the rest of the world. And he wanted to create a cadre of professionals who would be able to manage this aspect of the country. Professor K.C. Malhotra was very, very skeptical about it. We went ahead with discussions with the UGC. The UGC also was very hesitant in starting off MBA tourism, because they said when you already have a Master of Business Administration, we don't see the need for starting a Master of Business Administration brackets tourism. So we thought of a devious way of getting through to them. They were at that time advocating vocational studies. And we modified our scheme and wrote to them saying that we wanted to start an institute of vocational studies where we did not want to make job seekers, but we wanted to make job providers. And the best kind of job provider would be a person who was trained in tourism, who could start his or her own unit, whether on a small scale or a large scale, and then employ others. So that fortunately clicked. And the UGC granted us an Institute of Vocational Studies, under which we started the MTA program. Having started that, however, was not enough because, university system is such, any course that requires to be introduced has a time period of 2 to 3 years. The Vice Chancellor challenged me to prepare a module of the statutes and the rules and regulations for which would be included in the university handbook for the Institute of Vocational Studies. And he challenged me to do it within 2 days. So we're burning the midnight oil. We were able to do it and put it on his desk before the deadline. We got through, and then we had to seek special permission not to wait for 2 years.
Yes.
Because it would have taken 2 years to form the syllabus. So we picked up the syllabus from other places, patched it all together in today's words of cut, copy, and paste, and put through a syllabus without staff, because again, university system, you have to get the approval from the finance committee and then advertise and wait for a certain period without any regular staff, taking the help of existing staff in the university and professionals. This is where I was fortunate. You did take the name of Yogesh Bail. You took the name of Vijit Patel. These two, along with Mr. Dhyan Chand, who was the managing director of Kufri Holiday Resorts, and other Mr. Bhui, who was the principal of the Kufri Institute of Hotel Management, and other people from the IAS, Purnima Chauhan and others, plus people from the trade, from the travel and tourism trade, were roped in to take classes for the students. We started our batch in 1992, March 1992, with an initial intake of 11 students, to which, after about 2 months, another 5 joined in. It was a 2-year course, but there's still a lot of fighting going on because it was difficult. It was very difficult to try and convince the university budget people. I remember very well, I had a person, Mr. Virat Verma, who was in the Kutab Hotel at that time.
Yes.
He was the general manager at the Kutab Hotel. I asked him to come up for taking guest lectures, and when he filled in the form for his, obviously he wrote saying that he did not want any TA or DA. He booked himself into Oberoi Clark's, and he came on his own. But as a small token, I had to give some honorarium, and the basic pay that he filled in at that time was 80,000 rupees. And I was called by the auditors and said, you probably have got a mistake in the zeros. There should be 1 zero less. So that was the kind of blockages that we had to face. But fortunately for me, I was able to put together a team of advisors. We had an advisory committee which was headed, the chairman of that advisory committee was Rai Bahadur MS Oberoi himself. And I had people, doyens of the industry, with Mr. Yashraj Kapoor from the ITDC. I had people from hotels. I had people from the tour and travel industry. So we were fortunate in getting guidance on how to mold our course over the years. But as you rightly said, even today, people say that when students go down to be absorbed, they're lacking, they're more theoretical. One reason for that, I know, as I tried to make it mandatory in the course, was that we should have had at least a 6-month on the job training program. But that was not acceptable to the academia. And they wetted it down to a normal 2-month on the job training, just at par with the MBA participants. But we are still fortunate in the sense that we were from a small state. And the one selling point that I had when I had to go down to Delhi with the students for their interviews, job interviews, was in trying to convince the people, was that, look, my students are from Himachal. It is a very small state. It is a peace-loving, very innocent state. My students are, let me say, very dedicated, honest, and they would like to stay with you for as long as possible. So they would be, to choose the right word, they would be very loyal to the organization. Unlike other students who were coming from Delhi and other metropolitans who will use your organization as a stepping stone. And that is what clicked. You see, everyone did realize that these guys coming from a small state, humble background, would probably take up a PG and then stick with them for at least 5 to 7 years, and they would not be wasting their resource. Otherwise, people coming from Delhi would probably move within 3 months or 6 months as soon as they got a better opportunity. So that is where we clicked. But unfortunately for us, the one thing I tried to do with the first 2 or 3 batches that passed out, in terms of wanting to make them job providers rather than job seekers, and that is where unfortunately I failed, was when I tried to convince the government of the state with the one fact that there are hundreds of PWD rest houses in the state, 2, 3, 5 bedroom properties. And I suggested that those should be given to groups of students that we, the Institute of Vocational Studies at the HP University, would sponsor. We would name the students, we would get them registered as a small society or a body or a cooperative. And we would want the state government to hand over one particular property to one particular group, lease it out to them, and on a rental basis or whatever. And the formula I gave was you take the last 5 years' earnings from a particular property that you get, the return, not earning, the return that you get from the rooms that you let out, and put a 10% increase on that, and you lease it out to the students. Unfortunately, no one in the government agreed. If they'd done so, I think we would have been blessed to have job providers. The second thing that I tried desperately when I was part of the advisory committee somewhere in the state was to have district tourism officers. The suggestion, online with what Madhav Rao Sindhya ji had said, ITS, was to have a tourist officer in each district of the state who would be responsible for the development of the infrastructure for tourism. And he would be getting 1 to 2% of the budget of every department in the district to use for this purpose. We were successful to the extent that Himachal has 12 districts. 12 district tourist officers posts were created, sanctioned and created. But when it came down to filling up those posts, 4 were reserved for those who were already working in the Himachal Tourism Development Corporation. 4 were reserved for the Himachal Administrative Service candidates, and 4 were reserved for some other departments. Result being that there was not a single tourism educated professional on that post. But things have changed now, Gulshanji. Things have changed over the years. We had started off with saying you should have orchard tourism because we are famous for the orchards. We wanted blossom tourism, just as in Japan. Things have now come to us to such a pass that homestays have come up in orchards. Homestays have come up in rural areas, which people prefer to go to now rather than stick around in cities like Shimla or Dharamshala or Manali. So that means they're opening up other vistas for tourists to visit. And in a way that is good because the carrying capacity of the old tourist resorts, tourist towns like Shimla or Manali or Dharamshala are overextended. We've got to do something now that takes the tourist to other new pristine areas. But there again, my fight with the government has always been that the Tourism Development Corporation, whether it is Himachal or it is Haryana or it is Punjab or it is Kerala, wherever, unfortunately, they have lost sight of what they should actually be doing. The very word Tourism Development Corporation, let's say HP Tourism Development Corporation, implies that you should actually be developing the infrastructure of new places so that the private entrepreneur gets an excitement to go and invest there. It does not mean that you construct a hotel or you buy a palace and convert it into a hotel and run it yourself. That is not development of tourism. That is, you have become a hotelier, a full-fledged hotelier. There is nothing else that you're doing in the state, whether it is Himachal or Haryana. I mean, Haryana, yes, to an extent, both Himachal and Haryana were created on the same day, same year. Haryana managed to convert its dust into gold. But Himachal, unfortunately, turned its gold into dust. If you see the development of Haryana, the roadside tourism that they developed places like Surajkund. Any roadside destination has a drive-in facility for the tourist. You're driving from Delhi to Chandigarh, you can stop on the road anywhere, you get clean facilities, you get good food, you get good stuff. We don't have that in Himachal. You can drive from Parvanu to Shimla. You can count at least 150 dhabas, but very few. Now, of course, over the last 5-10 years, good facilities have come up. But otherwise, before that, there was just nothing available. But we are making strides, and hopefully, God willing, we should do better.
Let's share. Okay, let's share something. So, something very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing all that insight. Now, let's come to post retirement. How are you enjoying and what are you doing?
Oh, well, post retirement, my son did his MBA, also from Himachal University. And as I joke sometimes, both of us retired on the 30th of June 2012. He passed out and I retired. So he initially, we have a tract of land here and he wanted to start a hotel. Construct a hotel, but I was a bit pessimistic over the fact. I said, look, you must have some kind of
exposure, experience.
No, number one, you must have exposure, and number two, you must have a way of paying back, because a hotel requires a lot of loans. Investment and loans.
Yes.
And you must be in a position, you must have the capability to pay back at least the interest portion of the loan that you're going to take. So he then decided, we had this property on the Mall and it was lying vacant. 3 floors of it was lying vacant. That's where my parents used to have their clinic. So he said he would rather go in, because he was interested in the hotel business. He said, I'll start off with a restaurant, a bar and a restaurant, and work on that for about 8 to 10 years. And once that is successful and I can generate enough income from there to be able to pay off some of the interest burden of the loans that I may have to take for the hotel construction in future, then I'll go into the hotel line. So we went into restaurant. We started a small restaurant.
Okay. So now from academics, when you have come to practical, I wish to know from you and I wish to understand the challenges.
It's very easy to say things in theory and in a classroom. But the amount of red tapeism, the amount of running around that you have to do to get a single permit. And let me tell you, there are lots and lots of permissions that you've got to hunt for. And every permission and every place where the file moves, it takes at least 2 to 3 months, unless you know someone. But all said and done, you've got to get the food license, you've got to get your staff has to be checked health-wise. They must have their health reports. You've got to get your bar license or your restaurant license. Then you've got to get clearances from electricity, water, pollution. You've got to be registered with the tourism department. These are just a few of the main things I'm telling you. All that takes time, but that also is a learning process.
Okay. Do you feel that whatever we lost in Jammu and Kashmir, did Himachal take benefit or advantage of that opportunity? For example, there used to be a direct flight from Bombay to Srinagar, and the whole load of Bollywood, everything, they all used to go over there. Because whenever I meet any production house, they are always crying. They say that, look, the people feel that we are very rich, we can pay exorbitant, and we can, and small rentals, small place, so much is being charged and all that. Do you feel that sometime so much, and you gave an example of Himachal Pradesh Tourism Development Corporation also, there are so many properties which must be underutilized, subutilized, may not be optimum utilized. Maybe certain property is not doing very well. If we rope in the younger generation in a practical way somewhere, and particularly post COVID, when children have suffered quite a bit, families have suffered quite a bit, business have suffered quite a bit, and all that, can we relook at the entire thing? Syllabi has to be changed, curriculum has to be changed, skill has to be changed, delivery mechanism has to be changed, everything has to be changed. How do you look at that scenario?
Gulshanji, you're right. We have to change our methods of teaching. We've got to change our methods. We've got to change our mindset.
Mindset. Yes.
Basically, you've got to change the mindset.
Yes.
There
Yes.
is no other option. Like today, for example, you talked of the pandemic. This year, I'm not talking of last year. Last year, the lockdown came as a shock for everyone. But this year, people were more, or quite a few of them were prepared for a kind of lockdown coming with the second wave.
Huh.
And lots and lots of people, what with work from home having started, you'll be surprised to know that Simla itself, or maybe Dharamshala, Manali by itself, the core areas, the properties may have been vacant, but small homestays and B&Bs were full because they had Wi-Fi. They were in beautiful locations, close to nature. People from all metropolitans, be it Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, Delhi, Lucknow, anywhere, they rushed to these B&Bs and homestays and booked themselves in for months at end, saying, when it is work from home, whether I work from a place like Bombay or I work from a place like Narkanda, is immaterial. But at least I'm safe. I'm away from the madness of the pandemic, and I am relaxed and enjoying myself. So now that is something that everyone here who is in the tourism sector would have to consider. The change in mindset. Maybe we now have to think in terms of, not going in for huge properties, especially in a state like Himachal, where the NGT has unfortunately crossed its bounds and put a blanket ban on high-rise constructions. If I want to now construct a house, commercial property, let's say a hotel in Simla, I cannot construct beyond 2 floors, in which I must have 1 floor mandatory parking. So the entire exercise becomes futile. It is uneconomical.
It's not viable.
It's not viable at all.
Yeah.
It's not viable. So rather than that, if I put up 4 or 5 cottages with 4 or 5 bedrooms each on 2 floors with an attic, you see, that is a mindset that has to start. You've got to start shifting.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's a very practical, and that's what is futuristic.
Unless the Supreme Court overturns the NGT ruling, That is just one example I'm giving.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
What would you like to tell the younger generation, children those are aspiring to get into hospitality or tourism industry in future? Because nowadays I'm seeing a lot of children are interested to become chef. Quite a few of them, and we are changing the definition of travel agent is called travel facilitator.
True.
And including when people are coming for Buddhist tourism, we call it a Buddhist pilgrimage. We
Pilgrimage.
don't call it a Buddhist tourism. So quite a bit of it when it is changing. What message would you like to give to the younger generation?
You see, having spent now 8 years, 8.5 years on the practical side in running a restaurant, uh, the one thing that I've learned is that you are totally dependent on your labor force. There is
Absolutely.
no two ways about it. You're totally dependent on a labor force, which is, sorry to say, most unreliable. You see, unfortunately, even in the trade itself, what happens is uh, during the peak period or during the tourist season, let's say in a place like Shimla, tourist season normally starts mid-April and goes into June. So there are people who say we don't want to employ people throughout the year. So when the tourist season starts, they float out a message saying that we will give twice the salary that is prevalent, and they poach on your staff, because obviously the staff doesn't realize. The labor would say, well, I'm getting X amounts there compared to, I'm getting Y there compared to X out here, which is much more than what you're giving me. So goodbye, leaving me in the lurch. Not realizing that at the end of the tourist season, that Y amount will come to zero because he's shunted out. So what I'm saying is we are such a labor dependent or employee dependent industry that the youngsters must learn, especially when it comes to restaurants and maybe even the hotel itself or small homestays, that you must be trained as a chef. You must be able to take over the kitchen if your chef gives you a 1 week notice and says, I am leaving. You must have a mindset not saying that I'm an owner. If your service staff reports sick or leaves you, you should be able to pick up your service tray and go straight without any hesitation and serve the client who's sitting on the table.
Wonderful.
This is what
Wonderful.
I've seen abroad. I mean, I keep
Hmm.
visiting my daughter in Australia,
Hmm.
and you go to the cafes there, you go to the restaurants, the owners or the managers themselves are serving the clients.
Yes.
That respect for that kind of a job is something that has to be generated.
Maybe a passion within,
Not
Yeah.
only a passion, unfortunately, as I say always, when we travel abroad, we have a toffee or we have lollipop, and we'll put the wrapper in our pocket and come home and throw it in the dustbin. But the moment I land in Delhi and I'm in a car, I take out the same wrapper and I throw it out of the window. You see, that is
Mindset.
something that we've got to change.
Mindset.
The
Mindset.
mindset has to change.
So, Deepak ji, thank you very much. Before we close, let's have next to your heart, you have been a teacher, you have been a professor. You set the trend over there and you rolled out the carpet for tourism, particularly the MTA tourism, I still recall. Tell me, what would you like to tell today's teachers, today's educators, today's, the people those are into so-called training and trainers? What would you like to tell them?
Well, I would personally uh, like they say, each one teach one. That is not possible in a university setup. But I would definitely like that you have mentors from industry,
Yes.
from wherever. I mean, let's say if it is Shimla, if I have 35 students working, I must try, and what I'd like is to have mentors from industry look after 2 or 3 students.
Wow.
Give them the practical side of that. And
Yes.
the other thing, yes, the education field and the education sector, the government and the UGC must all understand that 2 months is not enough time for a person to get practical
Yeah.
training anywhere. I would love it to be a 1 year compulsory training in any field that the child opts for. But if 1 year is too long a period, then at least 6 months on the job training is required.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Today is Wednesday, just 2 days away is a Guru Purnima. And all the children, those are watching this particular program, please remember your gurus and please remember all those people who have been deeply associated emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, technologically, vocationally, whatever they have been doing. And we had a wonderful interaction with one of the great teachers of tourism from Himachal Pradesh today, and Professor Deepak Suji. He being the pioneer, I still recall that day, and that's very fresh in my memory. Very, very fresh. Thank you.
Thank you, Gulshanji. Thank you very much.
God bless. Regards to your family. Stay fit, stay fine. Take
Thank
care of your health and keep